Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Thursday, January 29th, 2026. And I have to say, if you've been scanning the headlines this morning or, scrolling through your feed, you might have noticed the ground shifting a little bit under our feet.
It definitely feels like the wind is blowing in a different direction today. A very specific eastern direction.
Right. For the last few years, really since the early 2020s, the whole story in global politics has been this idea of decoupling. It was all about nations building fences, securing their own supply chains, sort of retreating into their corners. It was the era of the Great Chill.
Exactly. It was stay in your lane, friend shoring, and don't talk to the neighbors.
But looking at the stack of sources we have today, the temperature is changing fast. It feels like 2026 is shaping up to be the year of the awkward reunion.
That's a good way to put it.
We're seeing major Western powers who spent years giving Beijing the cold shoulder suddenly showing up on the doorstep again.
It's a fascinating pivot. And honestly, it's not just about politeness or some sudden change of heart. It's about survival. Today, we're unpacking a massive diplomatic shuffle. We have the UK Prime Minister touching down in China for the first time in 8 years.
Which is huge, just huge.
It is. But we also have to look at the cost of that visit. Specifically, a single prisoner in Hong Kong whose fate might be the price of admission for this new relationship.
And the map just keeps expanding. While all the cameras are on Beijing, there is a high-stakes election looming in South Asia. We're talking 127 million voters.
A number that's hard to even process.
And then you've got India right in the middle playing this complex game of 4D chess with the EU, Russia, and the US.
It is a lot to track. But our mission here isn't just to list the events. We need to figure out why everyone is hitting the reset button right now. Is this a genuine diplomatic breakthrough? Or is it just, economic desperation disguised as strategy?
That is the million-dollar question. So let's start with the big one, the UK and China. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is in the middle of a 4-day visit.
4 days.
And to put that in perspective for everyone listening, a British Prime Minister hasn't set foot there in 8 years.
Think about that. 8 years. In geopolitical terms, that is an eternity. Think about the world 8 years ago. Pre-pandemic, a completely different economic landscape, different tensions. The silence between London and Beijing has been deafening.
So for Starmer to physically go there,
To get on the plane and land in Beijing, it just creates a massive signal. It says the era of total isolation is officially over.
but the language they're using is, well, it's interesting. Starmer says he's looking for a sophisticated relationship. That feels like a very specific, very carefully chosen word. To me, it sounds like a euphemism for we don't really like each other, but we need to pay the bills.
You've absolutely hit the nail on the head. Sophisticated is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. In the world of diplomacy, when you call a relationship sophisticated or complex, you're essentially admitting that it's messy. You're saying, look, we have fundamental disagreements on security, on human rights, on governance. Those aren't going away.
What?
But we're going to choose to act like adults and trade anyway.
So it's an attempt to compartmentalize,
Yeah.
just put things in different boxes.
Precisely. You put the trade in one box, the moral outrage and security concerns in another box, and you just pray that the fluids don't leak into each other.
Well, the trade box is definitely getting opened. The immediate headline, the carrot China dangled right away, is this agreement for 30-day visa-free travel for British citizens.
Which is huge. Don't underestimate the soft power of visa policies.
It connects directly to regular people. If you're a consultant or a student or just a tourist, the friction of going to China just dropped to zero.
Exactly. It facilitates business travel immediately. It's a low-cost way for China to say, we're open for business. And it's a tangible win for Starmer to take back home. Look, I got his access.
And on top of that, they're talking about tariffs and services trade.
Which is the bread and butter of the UK economy.
But I have to play devil's advocate here. Why now? The UK has been pretty hawkish on security for years. They've been talking about removing Chinese tech from infrastructure, all these risks. Why is early 2026 the moment they decide to thaw the ice?
It comes down to cold, hard economic reality. Look at the context and the sources we have. Western economies are facing significant headwinds. The post-Brexit economic landscape in the UK is still, finding its footing, to put it mildly, and there's turbulence in the relationship with the United States. You can't just rely on the old alliances to drive growth anymore.
So ignoring the world's second largest economy just became too expensive.
It became unsustainable. This is a stabilization move. And notice, the UK isn't doing this alone. We've got reports in our stack that German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is expected to visit China next month.
Oh, really? So this isn't just Starmer going rogue.
No, it's a trend. It's a European wave.
Mm.
Look, Europe tried de-risking. They tried pulling back. But realizing that total isolation hurts their own industries, especially German manufacturing and British financial services, more than they can afford.
So they're swinging the pendulum back.
Back toward engagement because they need the markets. They need the cash flow.
However, you can't just talk about tariffs and visas and pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist. There is a massive elephant in the room. While Starmer is shaking hands and talking about a sophisticated future, there's a very real, very old conflict playing out in Hong Kong that complicates this entire picture.
You're talking about the Jimmy Lai case.
Right. And I want to pause here because names like Jimmy Lai can just float by on the news ticker and we just nod and move on. For you listening, who is he really? Why is he the sticking point?
Jimmy Lai is, I would argue, the most significant symbolic figure in the Hong Kong democracy movement. He's a media tycoon, a British citizen, which is crucial here, and the founder of Apple Daily.
Apple Daily was the pro-democracy paper, right? The big one.
It was the paper. It was the publication that consistently criticized Beijing, that documented the protests, that gave a voice to the opposition. It wasn't just a newspaper. It was a banner for the movement. And because of that, it was shut down.
And he stayed.
He didn't flee when things got tough. He stayed. And now he's paying the price.
The update in our sources is bleak. A Hong Kong court recently found him guilty under the national security law.
And the charges are severe collusion with foreign forces, sedition. I mean, these are charges that carry life-altering penalties. And we have to remember, Jimmy Lai is elderly. He's not some young activist who can wait this out for 20 years.
That brings us to the human element. His son, Sebastian Lai, has been incredibly vocal during Starmer's visit. He is not letting this get swept under the rug.
Sebastian is doing something very difficult and very brave. He is forcing the British government to look in the mirror. His message is stark. My father is a British citizen. He is dying in prison because he stood up for values you claim to hold.
Yeah.
If you sign a trade deal while he rots in a cell, what does that make you?
It puts Starmer in an impossible bind. On one side, you have the economy, the visa-free travel, the sophisticated relationship that business leaders want. On the other side, you have the son of a British citizen saying his father's life is on the line.
It completely exposes the limits of that sophisticated approach we talked about.
Oh.
Sebastian Lai and his supporters, they argue this case is a litmus test. If the UK can't protect its own prominent citizen in a former colony, then all the talk about human rights is just noise.
But for Beijing?
From Beijing's perspective, Lai is a threat to national sovereignty. There is no middle ground there.
So Starmer is trying to balance these economic wins, which he needs for his domestic voters, with these profound moral and security compromises. It seems like the compartmentalization strategy just falls apart when human lives are involved.
It does. You can't separate the two boxes forever. Friction points like this tend to heat up and, burn through the cardboard.
Yeah.
You can't have a purely transactional relationship when one side is holding your citizen prisoner.
And what's so interesting is that this tension, this clash between economic necessity and political values, it isn't just happening in East Asia. If we look over to South Asia, there is another massive event brewing that's testing everyone's diplomatic skills.
Right. Let's pivot to Bangladesh.
Because the scale here is just mind-boggling. We are talking about an election coming up on February 12, 2026.
The numbers are staggering. Over 127 million eligible voters.
127 million.
To give you a sense of scale, that's nearly twice the population of the UK, all going to the polls or trying to in a single election cycle.
But this isn't just a standard get-out-the-vote scenario. The lead-up has been incredibly controversial.
Controversial is putting it mildly. It is a powder keg. You have the former Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, currently in exile.
And she's in India, correct?
She is. She's in India, which is a crucial detail we'll get back to. She was ousted, she fled across the border, and now, from exile, she is publicly denouncing this upcoming election. She's calling it illegitimate before a single vote has even been cast.
That's a heavy accusation. What is she basing that on?
Well, she's raising concerns about inclusivity, civil rights, and whether the interim government can ensure a fair process. She's arguing that her party and her supporters are being disenfranchised. Essentially, she's saying the game is rigged.
And is the international community listening?
Oh, they're on high alert. We have reports of international observers flying in to monitor everything: press freedom, minority rights, the safety of polling stations. There is a real fear that if this election is seen as fraudulent, It won't just lead to protests, it could lead to widespread violence.
Why does this specific election matter on the global stage, though? I mean, why should a listener in Berlin or New York care about the internal politics of Bangladesh?
Location, location, location. Bangladesh is a pivot point. It borders India, it borders Myanmar, it sits right on the Bay of Bengal. It is a crucial trade corridor and a security buffer.
So if it destabilizes,
If Bangladesh destabilizes, it spills over into India's volatile eastern states. It creates a refugee crisis. It disrupts trade routes. Stability there is non-negotiable for the region.
this connects right back to our theme of difficult choices. Western powers want a stable Bangladesh for security reasons, but they also preach democracy. If the election is flawed, do they call it out and risk chaos, or do they accept a flawed result for the sake of stability?
It's the Jimmy Lai problem on a national scale. Values versus interests. And the fact that Sheikh Hasina is sitting in India adds a whole other layer of complexity for New Delhi. They need a friendly government in Dhaka to keep their eastern border quiet. They're watching this with bated breath.
Speaking of India, they really seem to be the grand master of this current diplomatic game. If the UK is scrambling to reset with China and Bangladesh is on the edge, India seems to be sitting in the middle doing, well, everything at once.
India's strategy right now is what analysts are calling strategic diversification, but I prefer to think of it as aggressive non-alignment.
Explain that. Usually you pick a team, right? You're Team West or Team East.
Not anymore. That's old thinking. India is refusing to pick a lane. Instead, they're paving a 12-lane highway and driving on all of them at the same time. Look at the data points in our stack. They're deepening ties with the European Union, signing trade deals, inviting investments. At the very same time, they're maintaining their historical defense and energy relationship with Russia.
And still engaging with the U.S. on tech.
Exactly. They're buying oil from Russia, selling services to the U.S., and negotiating trade with the EU, all while managing a very tense militarized border with China.
It feels like everyone else is playing checkers and India is playing some kind of multiplayer solitaire where they control the whole deck.
They're maximizing leverage. They know they're a rising power, a massive market, a counterweight to China, and they refuse to be a junior partner to anyone. They are betting that the West needs them too much to complain about their ties to Russia.
I often see this narrative in the media of a race between India and China. Is that what we're seeing here? Is India trying to beat China at this global influence game?
It is so tempting to frame it as a zero-sum race, India versus China. But the reality is more nuanced. It's not a head-to-head sprint. It's more like parallel tracks. China is boosting its partnerships, like this new opening with the UK, to secure its economy against containment. India is building its own network to secure its rise as an independent pole of power. They are competing for influence for sure, especially in the global south, but they are playing different games.
And we can't talk about India's balancing act or the UK's economic pressure without mentioning the backdrop to all of this. The Russia-Ukraine war.
It is the constant variable. It's been going on for years now. The conflict continues, Russia is persisting despite all the sanctions, and Ukraine is holding on with Western support.
It almost feels like the war has just become the new normal.
In a way, yes. But it shapes every single thing we've discussed today. Why is the UK so desperate for Chinese trade? Because the war in Ukraine drove up energy prices and disrupted the entire European economy.
Right.
Why is India's relationship with Russia so controversial? Because of the war. You cannot pull on one string without the whole web moving.
That's a crucial insight. We tend to read these stories in isolation, Starmer in Beijing, an election in Dhaka, fighting in Donetsk. But your point is that the war in Europe is actually driving the British Prime Minister to look for money in Asia.
Indirectly, yes. The economic pressure from the war creates the political necessity to find growth somewhere. And despite everything, despite the decoupling talk, despite the security concerns, China is still the engine you can't ignore.
So let's try to pull all these threads together for you. We started with this idea of a mood shift on January 29th, 2026.
Right.
It seemed like we're moving from a period of high-minded isolation to a period of gritty, uncomfortable pragmatism.
That is the defining theme of 2026. We are seeing the death of purity in foreign policy. It is uncomfortable for Keir Starmer to shake hands in Beijing while Sebastian Lai pleads for his father. It's uncomfortable for the West to watch India buy Russian oil. But leaders are deciding that the cost of purity is just too high.
It's almost like the world tried decoupling, realized it was too expensive, and is now trying to figure out how to be, what, frenemies?
Business partners who agree not to discuss politics at dinner.
Uh-huh.
But here's the catch, and this is what the Jimmy Lai case teaches us. You can't silence those political realities forever. The friction points don't vanish just because you sign a visa deal.
The people.
The voters in Bangladesh, the activists in Hong Kong, they are the variables that can wreck the whole sophisticated plan.
And that is what I want you to really think about today. We see headlines about tariffs and trade flows. It sounds so dry, so administrative. But underneath all that, there are real human stakes.
Absolutely.
There is Sebastian Lai fighting for his dad. There are millions of Bangladeshi citizens wondering if their voice will actually count in February.
And that is the tension of our time. Can we sustain a transactional world that ignores values? Or will those values eventually force their way back onto the agenda? History suggests they usually do.
Which brings us to the final thought I want to leave everyone with. We're seeing Europe rush to re-engage with Beijing for economic stability. We're seeing India play the middle ground to maximize its own growth.
Everyone is looking out for number one.
So the question is this: are we seeing the end of values-based diplomacy in favor of pure transactional survival? And if so, where does that leave the individual citizens who are caught in the gears of these giant tectonic shifts?
That is the question. When survival becomes the priority, who gets left behind?
Something to mull over as you watch the news this week. Thanks for diving in with us. We'll be keeping an eye on how that sophisticated relationship develops.
Indeed. Till next time.
See you then.